Hi and welcome to Work in Progress, my channel dedicated to continual development in reading and in writing. Today I'm going to talk to you about 66 books, my experience with it, and the books that I got whilst I was there. 66 Books is this enormous book warehouse that is used on the daily as a sort of trade operation. However, on certain weekends of the month, and it's usually only one weekend a month, it's available for the public to come in and browse and buy books. And this is at a vastly discounted rate, 70% to be specific. When it came to our experience, there were a lot of things that we had heard that sort of informed how we went about going there in the first place. We had heard that you should get there really early, or you should get there about midday, but either way there's going to be a queue. We'd heard these horror stories of people getting there at about 6 in the morning and still waiting 2 hours, and it sounded like it was going to be a bit of havoc anyway. Ever since it first appeared on social media, 66 Books has just continued to gain popularity, and it's likely that as more people find out about it, it's just going to get even more popular. I imagine that they will open it up on other weekends, because one weekend a month, it makes it so hectic. By the end of this video, if you are interested in going, make sure that you visit their website or their Facebook and check the dates that they are open, otherwise you won't be allowed in. We decided with all that we'd heard to set off at about midday, and we got there at about 1:30. When we arrived, we heard there was a 2.5 hour queue, and I was getting stressed because I thought we wouldn't make it in. It turns out that the queue actually moved much quicker than I'd anticipated. We were in within about an hour and a half, which was great because we actually made it. One of the main drawing points of 66 Books is its scale. It's enormous. It literally is a warehouse. You can't quite get in your head how big it's going to be until you're there. It's like the TARDIS in a sense. It's so much bigger on the inside, or at least it feels it. That's going to get clipped. Whilst I was there, I bought 8 books, and this came to roughly £24, which is daylight robbery, really. You're paying £10 for a new book these days. To pay £3 is obscene. It feels like stealing. I went in there expecting to get 2 or 3 books. 8. So, makes you a bit less frugal. But the first book I bought was this one. This is Ernest Hemingway's For Whom the Book Tolls. For Whom the Book Tolls. For Whom the Bell Tolls. So here's a brief plot summary. High in the pine forests of the Spanish Sierra, a guerrilla band prepares to blow up a vital bridge. Robert Jordan, a young American volunteer, has been sent to handle the dynamiting. There, in the mountains, he finds the dangers and the intense comradeship of war. And there he discovers Maria, a young woman who's escaped from Franco's rebels. The reason why I bought this book is because I have an interest into reading Hemingway. I've heard a lot about him, he seems very interesting. I was gifted a notebook a couple of Christmases ago, and it has a Hemingway quote on there, which is "Write the truest sentence that you know." And I like his ethos, writing honestly, writing up to the point of knowing where you're going to go next, never doing more than you should. Now, Hemingway emerged from that golden age of writers after the First World War, where men had gone to fight and came back changed, and they turned to the pen and page, or the typewriter, whichever implement you choose. I picked this up not so much because I'm interested in the plot, I picked it up because it's Hemingway, and I want to discover more about him, and I want to learn why he is so influential. Up next, I bought this book, Bulgakov's The Heart of a Dog. So this is Mikhail Bulgakov, who is most famous, I think, for writing the book The Master and Margarita. I haven't read The Master and Margarita yet. It's one of those that I keep looking at and I keep considering, but I've heard that it's very intellectual and I don't know if I'll get it yet. I'm sort of scared of my own lack of intelligence, and I fear that I will read it and just go, yeah, that was good. I'd like to have more to say than that. I think it would be good to contribute something useful to the conversation in the world. This book has arguably the greatest premise ever put to page. A rich, successful Moscow professor befriends a stray dog and attempts a scientific first by transplanting into it the testicles and pituitary gland of a recently deceased man. Genius. A distinctly worryingly human animal is now on the loose, and the professor's hitherto respectable life becomes a nightmare. Who comes up with this? Who thinks of this as a plot? It's genius. And then this man-dog, whatever you want to call it, gets out and is on the loose and exploring society. And I know nothing else, but I don't care. That is genius. Why does no one write books like this anymore? It just seems to me a wonderful idea of satire, taking an uncivilized animal and turning it into a high society man. I cannot wait to read this. I've been so excited to read it since I bought it. I've been thinking about it a lot, and I get sort of giddy when I think about it. Up next, I bought Kenneth Grahame's The Wind in the Willows. This is a children's book, I know, but I'd watched an interview with Harold Bloom when he was talking about great literature, and the decline of it in modern society. This was, I think, a 20-year-old interview. And he mentioned The Wind in the Willows as a great piece of literature for children, but also generally that it's just a great work. And I thought, okay, well, I haven't read it, I don't think, so I should probably give it a look in just to see. So I'll give you a plot summary. One day, Mole pokes his nose out of the tunnel and discovers that the world is an exciting place. He meets brave Ratty, kind old Badger, and the rascally Mr. Toad, and together they go on adventuring. The Wind in the Willows is a classic animal adventure that charms and enthralls, and this edition contains illustrations. So if it's boring me, there's always drawings to look at. I don't want to disparage the writing too much because I think this will be lovely. I think it's important that we emphasise that even though this book may be written for children, from what Bloom was saying, this book is not just for a younger audience, it's something that anyone can enjoy as a work of literature. It seems to me that we have this very clear divide between what is for children and what is for an older audience, an adult audience. Children's work can be thoughtful and provocative, and I'm hoping that this book will prove that to me. The next two books in this I will cover at once because they're by the same author, one of my favourite authors, and those works are these two, both by Charles Bukowski. I'll cover this one first, Tales of Ordinary Madness. Bukowski's a controversial figure. I think his writing is incredibly provocative, it's incredibly simple, and yet very poetic. When I read Bukowski's work, it's a matter of I'm enjoying it a great deal and it's very easygoing, I can fly through it, and then suddenly you're struck by a sentence or even a couple of words that are so perfect and so beautiful, and you stop and you wonder, how did he write that? It's in between all this nastiness and this just filth, really. And he comes out with such beauty. And Tales of Ordinary Madness, this is a short story collection that is not a particular facet of his work that I'm familiar with. I'm more familiar with his novels, and I'm very excited to get into this, so I'll just break it down for you. In these Tales of Ordinary Madness, Charles Bukowski ingeniously mixes high and low culture, from prostitutes and the philosophy of Kant to despair and classical music, to create his modern dystopia. Inspired by D.H. Lawrence, John Fante, who is one of Bukowski's favourite authors, and Hemingway, Bukowski's writing is passionate, extreme and relentlessly realistic. These are angry yet tender, humorous and haunting portrayals of life in the underbelly of America. This will be exactly what I'm after from him. It will be more of his great writing, more of his drunken poetry, and I think Leonard Cohen probably summed up his work best, which was, he brought everyone down to earth, even the angels. Very excited to read this. I'm a big fan of Bukowski's work. Notes of a Dirty Old Man. This collection of Bukowski's columns for an underground LA newspaper epitomises his style of gritty realism. Writing as himself, or his alter ego Henry Chinaski, who, for those of you who don't know, frequently appears in his novels, Bukowski delves into America's lowlife to eulogise life's losers and anti-heroes. Packed with violence, women, gambling and booze, Bukowski's semi-autobiographical stories veer between hilarity and despair as he extols the inherent beauty and futility of life. I can't say too much more on this one because it's going to be essentially a series of very true-to-life short stories that Bukowski is spinning about everything that's bothering him, everything that's keeping him up at night. If you like Bukowski, no doubt you've probably already read this. I'm very excited to read this, as I am with every Bukowski book. I think it'll be a great insight into his mind, one of the most fascinating and intriguing writers. Next, I picked up this. William Faulkner's Absalom, Absalom, or Absalom, Absalom, I don't know which way it is. William Faulkner is a writer that I've never read. I have 2 or 3 of his books. The reason why I bought them is because my favourite author, Cormac McCarthy, who I never mention, my way of learning, either with film or literature, is to go to who I like, look into them, research them, and learn who made them the way they are. Why did they turn out to write the way they did? And it becomes this way of continuously learning throughout history. From Faulkner, I'm hoping that I can get some insight into how McCarthy turned out the way he did, because the way McCarthy writes is just endlessly beautiful. There is such complex prose, but it's so easy to go along with it. And I'm hoping that from Faulkner I can get some sort of insight into what inspired him. Anyway, what's this book about? I hear you ask. As a poor white boy, Sutpen was turned away from a plantation owner's mansion by a black butler. From then on, he was determined to force his way into the upper echelons of Southern society. His relentless will ensures his ambitions are soon realised, land, marriage, children. But after the chaos of civil war, secrets from his own past threatened to destroy everything he has worked for. Such a time period in literature is not my strong point. I much prefer to read about either the 20th or 21st century. Reading this, I'm hoping, will broaden my tastes somewhat and tell me as to why I love Cormac McCarthy so much. Then, I can like Faulkner a lot. I've just noticed on the back, actually, that there's a quote from Harold Bloom, who I just mentioned, who says, "By universal consent, Faulkner stands as an equal in the sequence that includes Hawthorne, Melville, Mark Twain, and Henry James." So he's essentially saying that Faulkner is one of the great American authors, so that's high endorsement from a man such as Bloom, and I'm very much looking forward to this book. The penultimate book that I bought was another Hemingway book. I had about 4 in my basket at one point, but I thought I can't indulge so much when I don't even know if I'll like his writing. So I've already got 3 of his books. I think that's enough as a baseline. I basically picked the most essential books from him to start off with. And so this book is A Farewell to Arms, which I really like this cover. I think it's really nice. So what's A Farewell to Arms about? In 1918, Ernest Hemingway went to war. He volunteered for the ambulance service in Italy, was wounded and twice decorated. Out of this experience came A Farewell to Arms. Hemingway's description of war is unforgettable. He recreates the fear, the comradeship, the courage of his young American volunteer, and the men and women he meets in Italy with total conviction. But A Farewell to Arms is not only a novel of war. In it, Hemingway has also created a love story of immense drama and uncompromising passion. So, again, war fiction, not something I'm a big fan of. I've never gone out of my way to view something or to read something because of when it takes place, and I'm hoping again, like with the previous book I mentioned, to expand my tastes, broaden my literary horizons, and to just read more and to enjoy more. There's such beautiful fiction out there that if I did not try, I would never discover. My tastes would forever be like this. There is such great fiction out there, and this has been claimed to be one of those great works. The final book I got whilst I was there was this book here, Restless Souls. It's this enormous book. I don't know why they make it the size of a hardcover when it's a standard paperback. But this book, Restless Souls, by Dan Sheehan. Tom, Carl and Baz grew up together in Down in its Luck, Dublin. Friends since childhood, their lives diverged when Tom left home to be a war correspondent. Now, after 3 years embedded in the siege of Sarajevo, he returns a haunted shell of the lad who went away. Carl and Baz have no idea what they're doing, but they are determined to see him through the darkness, even if it means travelling halfway around the world. Hearing about an unlikely cure, an experimental clinic called Restless Souls, they embark on a road trip across California. But as they try to save Tom from his memories, they must confront their own, of what happened to their childhood friend Gabriel. And in doing so, they must ask how their boisterous teenage souls became weighed down, and why life got so damn complicated and sad. Now, this is covering a lot of things that I'm very interested in. One is tragicomedy. I'm a big fan of that as a genre. Several of my projects that I've written in the past have incorporated elements of tragicomedy. Always that sort of Shakespearean, Machiavellian downfall that, when paired with a darkly comedic moment, makes it all the funnier and all the sadder. It just really intrigued me. I was intrigued by the cover for one, but the cover itself uses a Venn diagram to break down the elements of genre that this book has, and how this ultimate moment in the middle is the title itself, Restless Souls, a perfect mix of comedy, road trip and tragedy. And it just seems really interesting, and I like the idea of going on a journey that is a metaphorical one of delving into the past and how one's past changes them in the future. I'm a big fan of that. But I like some of the reviews on the back here. At turns comedic, at turns literary, at turns thriller, at turns philosophical. Restless Souls never stops being a page-turner. This is a road journey into memory, and I think that's a great encapsulation of why I'm so excited to read it. Comedic, literary, thriller, philosophical, and a road journey into memory. How could you not want to read that? That's what I ask you. So those are all the books that I picked up whilst I was at 66 Books. Ultimately, should you go? One of the things that I would advise, make sure that you plan this ahead. I've heard people who live 4 hours away from it, drive down the night before, stay overnight at a hotel, and go in and pick up the books the next day. Don't do this. Otherwise you're spending £100 plus on a hotel that's unnecessary expense. If you want to go and it's a long drive, go on the day Just make sure you leave early enough that you can get there within a good time. Should you go? Ultimately, yes, I think it's a great experience. And if you're a lover of books, even someone who just wants to start out with reading, to go there and to get these new books for about £3-4 a pop, and you can get a hardback for about a £5, it's a no-brainer as to why you'd want to go there. I also think, and this should be mentioned more, if you're a parent who's not getting by all that well, this place is fantastic because there is so much choice for children. If it's not even about the books at the end of the day, it's just going and seeing how enormous and grand scale this whole operation is. That was exciting enough, but the fact that I got 8 books out of it that I'm really excited to read, that made my day. That did. And it made the whole journey worth it. If you've been to 66 books and you have a differing opinion or you want to share your own experience, let me know in the comments down below. Have a conversation with anyone that's there. If no one's there, I'll have a conversation with you. Share your hauls in the comments down below. What books did you get? Let me know. Thank you for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye bye.